The year is 2110. High-tech glass and metal skyscrapers are being built everywhere, and a giant billboard advertises a muscular man and a girl in a bathing suit. A modern white airship flies across the sky. Life extension research has made an incredible breakthrough. Several people are in capsules, various tubes are connected to them, and the capsules themselves are filled with liquid. Mankind has plunged headlong into training the body to extend youth. A girl in a sports top and shorts was exercising on a treadmill, her long purple hair tied back in a high ponytail. Nearby, other girls were also running on treadmills, and behind them, men were working out on a weight machine. That was when the holographic VR game God's Sphere was released. With technology that read every move the player made, God's Sphere became the most popular game on the planet. People wore special suits with sensors that transferred all their movements into the game, transforming them into knights in silver armor with warlike swords. If the player represented the way they held the sword, the digital version of them held the sword as well. Many companies sprang up to capitalize on the creation of guilds within the game. Suddenly, this venture became an unprecedented success. The stock chart showed their shares rising in value. The year is 2139. Players in special suits and virtual reality helmets were standing on platforms. They were in a fight with someone, so they were swinging their legs, punching their fists in the air. 3 men entered a room labeled Shadow Guild. One of them wore a tank top and was bald. The second man wore a gray jacket and had long white hair. The last one wore a black suit and had a messy hairstyle. A system window appeared. Your account has been deleted. Inside the capsule, Shifeng, a man with black hair, was sitting on a chair with an extended footrest. He was wearing a red and yellow metal suit. The guy slammed his fist on the armrest in frustration and asked what was wrong. His face looked tense. The resignation papers were thrown onto the step in front of the capsule. Shifeng started to walk out of the capsule and approached the 3 men who had approached him earlier. The white-haired man said that Shifeng should sign these papers. Shifeng lowered his head in frustration and said that he had sacrificed everything for the Shadow Guild to get to the top, and it was because of them that the Manhwa company had become a financial giant. Shifeng pressed his lips together and trembled. He said loudly and angrily that as soon as he expressed his refusal to merge the Shadow Guild with the other guilds, they wanted to delete his account. Finally, he added that they also suggested that he go to the finance office to calculate the amount of his payment. The white-haired man smiled viciously and laughed. He said that a personal estate and 5 million credits would be enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life, and Shifeng should accept their generosity. The men standing beside him crossed their arms on their chests and smiled contemptuously at Shifeng. Shifeng went to his mansion. He sat on the windowsill with a bottle of wine in his hand and an empty glass not far away. He changed into a house robe and looked at the piece of paper with all the payments. The man hummed unhappily and said sarcastically how generous they were. He said indignantly that he had brought them so much money over the years that it could have built an entire city. Shifeng's bedroom was a mess, with things scattered everywhere. Shifeng grinned angrily and tore up all the papers given to him. Pieces of paper flew onto the floor, and he said that he would never forgive the fact that they had just taken him away and fired him by deleting his account. Shifeng stepped down from the windowsill and sat down on the big white couch. He finished his wine and took a big gulp. After taking a sip, he exhaled loudly, a drop of sweat dripping down his face. Shifeng shouted that he would take revenge on them even if he started from scratch. After that, he passed out due to the large amount of alcohol he drank. He was awakened by a loud noise. Someone was calling him. The ringing didn't stop. With a pitiful and tired sigh, he began to open his eyes. Shifeng had a splitting headache and tiredly said that he shouldn't have drank so much yesterday. He picked up his phone and looked at the screen. His friend Blackie was calling him, and Shifeng didn't understand why he was calling him at all. Shifeng answered the call and asked what had happened. At that time, Na was sitting on his bed, covered with a blanket. He was wearing his house pants. Blackie said on the phone that the Shadow Guild was holding an audition today, so Shifeng should hurry up and go to school. Shifeng was silent for a while, trying to figure out what he was talking about. He moved to the edge of the bed and covered his face with his palm. He told Blackie that he was talking nonsense because Shifeng had just been fired yesterday. Shifeng threw the phone on the floor and started to get up. Blackie interrupted him and asked him how much he drank last night. At this time, Shifeng stood in front of the mirror and couldn't believe his eyes. He saw that he looked much younger, as if he had traveled back in time. His hair was longer and there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face. Shifeng ran over to his phone. Blackie was still calling him from there. The guy looked at the date in surprise. April 19th, 2129. Shifeng continued to stare at the screen in confusion. His lips pursed and his eyebrows raised in surprise. He realized that he had traveled 10 years back in time. Shifeng went to the school and approached the building. There were beautiful girls and muscular boys walking around. It was quite warm outside, with many people wearing tank tops and shorts. Shifeng put his hands in his pockets and thought. He hadn't expected God to give him a second chance. He had promised that the Shadow Guild, Manhwa, and everyone else who had betrayed him would pay for it. Shifeng pressed his lips together and furrowed his brows. He heard someone calling out to him, interrupting his thoughts. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw Blackie there. He happily waved at Shifeng, saying that he had been waiting for him and called him to come in. Blackie was wearing a simple white t-shirt and brown pants, and he had a short haircut. He was about to go to the registration desk, but he turned around and asked Shifeng why he was so sad and called him to come back with him. Shifeng put his hands back into his pockets and thoughtfully replied that he had another idea. He said that he didn't want to join other people's guilds and decided that it would be better to start his own guild. Shifeng asked him if he would go with him. Blackie was taken aback and looked at him in confusion, opening his mouth and furrowing his eyebrows. Shifeng relaxed his face and thought that Blackie would be a great manager in the future, and Shifeng would need his help. Blackie had only joined the shadows because of the money his family needed. He began to gesticulate vigorously, his face looking worried. He said that he had to pay for the equipment, rent, and workers' salaries, and it was going to be very expensive. Shifeng calmly stood in front of him and confidently said that if they signed the guild contract, they would literally become their slaves, and Shifeng never wanted to obey anyone again. Blackie exhaled in frustration and said that he was not against forming a guild, but even if they put in all their savings, they still wouldn't have enough. The boy panted heavily and bowed his head. Shifeng patted him on the shoulder and said that Blackie shouldn't worry about it. Shifeng looked at him good-naturedly and said that the God Sphere would give students a free trial period for a full 10 days. A frustrated Blackie asked again about the number of days and then asked what they would even have time to do in 10 days. Shifeng firmly told him that they would handle everything and that he could leave the money issue to him. He confidently looked into Blackie's eyes and gave him hope. After that, Shifeng went to the grocery store. There were a huge amount of different foods and snacks on the shelves. Shifeng grabbed some orange-wrapped chips with yellow details and then grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator. After that, he was given a helmet in the lobby of the building that would allow him to enter the God Sphere virtual reality game. His helmet was blue with white details and black leather inserts. Shifeng went to his house and started to put on gloves in the color of his helmet, blue with white and black details. He sat down on his bed. Above the bed was a poster of a superhero. Shifeng started to put the helmet on his head, after which he confidently said that he would soon enter the God Sphere. A system window appeared. The connection was successful. The 3 floating islands connected by stairs contained an observation deck and ancient Greek-style pantheons. Shifeng climbed up to the pantheon, which was illuminated by the bright sun. He looked around in fascination and said that he had managed to forget what the registration page used to look like. A girl flew above him, waving her huge black feathered wings. A blue pixel-like aura appeared around the girl. Shifeng lifted his head in a relaxed manner and looked at her. The girl flew over to stand in front of him. She waved at him, welcoming him into the God Sphere. The girl introduced herself as Gabrielle. She was a guardian angel. She had long pink hair tied in 2 high ponytails. She was dressed in an open bodysuit of black and purple colors, with the hem of the bodysuit flowing behind her back and gloves on her hands. She wore black stockings and high-heeled shoes. The girl spread her wings and enthusiastically introduced the 4 main branches of development, among which there were 12 classes, and then offered to choose a class according to your taste. Among them were warriors, which included the classes of heavy warrior, berserker, and knight. Weapon masters included swordsman, marksman, and assassin. Supporting classes included the cleric, seer, and druid. Among the mages, there were the elementalist, caster, and summoner classes. Shifeng chose the swordsman class by clicking on it. Gabriel said that the class was chosen and now he had to choose a future nickname. Shifeng decided to go with the same name he had used in the past, Yifeng. Several system windows with character parameters appeared in front of him, and then a dialog box appeared, nickname saved. Do you want to change the appearance of your character? Shifeng thought that of course, since he didn't want to be recognized by everyone. A system window with appearance parameters appeared in front of him, allowing him to change his face, eyes, hair, and its color. He tugged at the sliders on the screen to make his face as unsympathetic as possible. Gabrielle flapped her wings and rose into the air. She offered to select his place of appearance in the Star Moon Kingdom. Several system windows with a map of the game world appeared around Shifeng. He thought that White River City was the 5th largest city in the kingdom, with a good location and excellent development prospects. More importantly, he wouldn't get stuck between the big guilds there and could level up quietly. A map of White River City appeared on the system window, and Shifeng clicked on it. Gabriel smiled brightly and said that the city had been selected and Shifeng would be transported there in 3 seconds. She wished him luck and the countdown began. Shifeng covered his eyes and humbly waited for the teleportation. Gabriel flew in the opposite direction to greet the other recruits. A bright blue light flashed out, indicating that a player was moving. Shifeng appeared out of the blue pixelated aura. System window, White River City. Shifeng's hairstyle was completely different. His hair was longer and disheveled. He was wearing a blue shirt, black pants, and brown leather boots. He had an armor on his chest and a belt with a sword sheath on it. He looked around and reminisced about the first time he came here. He had a blue crystal above his head, while the others had green ones. Behind Shifeng was a 4-story building, and next to it was a warrior with a bare torso, holding an axe and a shield. He looked around and saw the other players. They were also dressed in medieval uniforms with armor, and they were selecting something in the system windows that appeared in front of them. Standing next to them were 2 knights, clad in armor from head to toe. A large number of players of various appearances had gathered in the city's main square. There were menacing-looking men, beautiful girls in dresses, and mushy guys. They were chatting about how realistic everything was in this game, asking each other where to find quests, and calling their friends to go hunting. The sky above the city was clear, and the sun was warming the air. Shifeng opened the system panel with his character's parameters. He had 4 skill points at his disposal. He thoughtfully scrolled through the panel and read the information available to him. Standing next to him was a girl in overalls and shorts, looking at something in her system window. 4 more experience points were given for each new level, and eventually, over time, each player would have their own skill tree, dice, and playstyle. The system window displayed all the basic information about his character: name, Yifeng, birthplace, star, moon, kingdom, race, human, guild, none, class, swordsman, level 0, free skill points 4, attribute, strength 5, attack 13, weight carried 4, dexterity 3, attack speed 3, defense 4, speed 4, fortitude 4, health 100 of 100, stamina 100 of 100, intelligence 2, magic 10, mana reserve 20, survival 2, mana regeneration 4, health regeneration 0. Logically, the swordsman is a strength-based class. In his previous life, Shifeng thought so and invested everything into it. But this time, he decided to do something different. Shifeng spent all 4 skill points on agility, as it is the best early skill choice for any warrior. Speed is often the deciding factor in melee combat. Unfortunately, humans would not realize this soon enough. Shifeng put his hand on his chest and exhaled. The system settings window disappeared and a new window appeared. His Blackie friend under the nickname of Black Cloud invited him for a video call. Shifeng accepted and Blackie's picture appeared on the window. He had changed his hairstyle, replacing his shaved head with a gorgeous, luxuriant head of hair sticking out to the sides, and he was holding a wooden staff in his hands. Blackie greeted Shifeng, saying that he had become a caster and was in the city of the Fallen Moon, and then asked where Shifeng himself was. Shifeng looked at Blackie through the screen and said he was at the White River. He said it was not far away, and Blackie could come to him. His friend sarcastically asked if it wasn't far and added that it would take him 7 hours to get there. Blackie raised his eyebrows in surprise and added that in that time, everyone would have time to level up and he would remain a nub. Shifeng calmly asked if he remembered their goal. He said that if you train like everyone else, you can't save up to start a guild. Blackie looked at him questioningly and then agreed with Shifeng. Shifeng asked him if he knew of any unique quests. Blackie's eyes sparkled and he smiled happily. He excitedly replied, "These are secret quests that only happen once in the north. They have very valuable rewards. It's said that they can't even be achieved in a dozen years with ordinary quests." Outside, it was getting dark. Shifeng headed towards Twilight Alley. Homeless people, bandits, beggars, and other marginalized players were already waiting for him. There was an ominous and unfriendly aura in the alley. Shifeng said that there was only one unique quest in White Hand City. While Blackie was talking to Shifeng via video call, threatening people had already started to approach Shifeng. However, as soon as Shifeng began to draw his sword from its sheath, the vagrants immediately began to retreat in fear. Seeing the reaction of the vagrants, Shifeng put his sword back into its sheath. He asked Blackie if he still wanted to swing without it. Blackie made an angry face and exhaled tiredly. He said he'd love to pump with him now, but it was a 7-hour drive and he'd rather go gray in that time. A homeless man nodded his bowl while looking at Shifeng. Blackie made an interested face, scratched his chin, and asked how Shifeng knew that there was a secret quest in White River City. He was silent for a second and then broke out into a broad smile, clenching his fists near his face. He wondered if someone was helping Shifeng and asked if he had found a beta tester by chance. Shifeng calmly looked at the video call screen and replied to Blackie that it didn't matter. He said that he would wait in White River City. Shifeng promised that he would help Blackie pump up as soon as he finished his quest. Blackie excitedly said that he understood and ended the video call, leaving Shifeng alone. He looked around. The streets were empty. There was a cart nearby, and behind it, a man was leaning against a wall. Shifeng approached him and asked if he needed any help. The man looked emaciated, with a thin face and long gray hair. He asked for some food, saying that he had been starving for 5 days. Shifeng began to pull his sword out of its sheath and replied that he was unfortunately unable to fulfill this request and asked if he needed anything else. He confidently said that he was capable of doing many things for the right price. In the world of this game, unique quests are only activated by saying a special phrase. The wanderer turned dark and looked at Shifeng spitefully. His eyebrows were furrowed, and the rest of his face was tense. He begged to kill the mayor of White River, a man named Cross. A system window appeared. Attention, player. You have been offered a unique mission, Sherlock. Please decide if you want to accept it before time runs out. There are 59 seconds left. Shifeng smiled and said that he didn't even need to be asked. He accepted the quest and went to the city center the next morning. All the buildings looked beautiful. They had beautiful wooden facades and red-tiled roofs. Shifeng arrived at the city hall. There was a long line in front of the mayor's desk. A warrior who had already gone through the line said happily, "At least someone in this game is assigning tasks to newcomers." A system window with a quest appeared in front of each player near the mayor's desk. Mayor Cross looked like a tall, stocky man. He had red hair, but a bald spot on top of his head. He was dressed in a red sweater with black details, and he wore massive gold armor on his arms. He was level 15. His health was 24-0 of 24-0, and his mana was 15-0 of 15-0. He waved the next player over to him. At that time, Shifeng was standing relaxed, eating a tomato. He looked at the mayor's health and mana numbers again and realized that there was no way he would be able to defeat the mayor in a fair fight. Without thinking, he threw the unfinished tomato right in the mayor's face. The mayor was astonished and leaned back. The people watching suddenly became silent and tense. They didn't realize what had just happened. A system window appeared in front of the mayor's face. The attitude level of the character Mayor Cross toward you has been downgraded to hostile. A tomato slid from Mayor Cross' face onto his desk, and he pounded it with his fists and shouted loudly. The mayor immediately jumped up from his seat, promising to kill Shifeng. His eyes glowed with a yellow light. At this time, Shifeng had already assumed a fighting stance and grabbed his sword. He mentally addressed the townspeople and said that it was time for them to say goodbye to their mayor. 15 minutes earlier, Shifeng had walked around the city among the identical buildings, looking for the city hall. There were a lot of people around, all busy with their own things. A beautiful girl in an elegant long dress with white hair looked at him. He didn't pay attention and went straight to the town hall. There was a huge line of newcomers from various classes standing in front of the doors. Shifeng looked at it disappointedly and mentally apologized to everyone in advance. He started to walk around the line, trying to get someone's attention. He coughed into his fist and a guy wearing a tank top with a sword behind his back looked at him. The guy turned to Shifeng and said that he had better go to the front of the line or the others would misunderstand him. He gestured to where the front of the line was. Shifeng looked at him and made a face as if he was confused. After that, he smiled slyly and thanked the guy for the advice, but replied that he hadn't come here for a quest and asked if he could tell the guy something himself. Shifeng said not to waste time here and suggested that he should pump somewhere else. The guy gave him an annoyed look and said how is it not to waste time here since everyone coming out of the city hall seems to be radiating happiness, and finally said not to fool him here. Shifeng raised his index finger with a smart face and said that the guy didn't understand him. Shifeng exclaimed that the best way to get pumped up was to hunt, and while he was standing here, he could have gained a lot of experience by now. The guy was embarrassed and said that even monsters were too much in demand now. He said that he would rather stand in line here than fight with the others for every boar. He remembered how a single boar had desperately fled from the countless warriors. Shifeng approached him and whispered, covering his mouth with his hand so that the others wouldn't hear. It's better to hunt in deserted areas where monsters regenerate slowly. Even though the prey was scarce, this guy could take it all for himself. Shifeng added that no one would interfere with him, so he would still be faster than the others. The guy's eyes glistened and he started to smile broadly. He asked if there was such a place, and if Shifeng wasn't cheating, then he would owe him a favor. Shifeng smiled, held out his hand, and said that for 20 coins, he was willing to tell the guy everything. The guy got angry and said sullenly that he would only give him 10 coins to begin with. Shifeng put his hand on his chest and looked at his fingernails. He offered the guy a deal. He would give him 10 coins and Shifeng would send him the location. And if he was right, the guy would give him another 10 coins. Shifeng also said that he was only offering this to him because Shifeng likes him. The guy gave up under his pressure and said disappointedly that he would try it once. A system window appeared, a transfer of 10 copper coins. Accept it or refuse it. Shifeng smiled faintly and said that he now had the means to buy a weapon against the mayor. He walked over to the market vendor and smiled at her. He asked her how much tomatoes cost. In addition to tomatoes, she had apples, carrots, and melons for sale, and she had huge barrels of beer behind her. The saleswoman wearing a cute green dress said that 1 tomato was worth 1 coin. Shifeng wordlessly asked her to give him 10 pieces. The girls passing by looked at him in shock when he said this. They started laughing, and one of them was even in tears from laughing. One of them said she couldn't believe he spent all his money on tomatoes and called him a weirdo. The other girl tried to cover her mouth and hold back her laughter, thinking that it was Shifeng's first time in the game. At that moment, Shifeng was already yelling at the mayor, insulting him and calling him names, after which he said that Cross didn't deserve to be the mayor, and threw another tomato at him. All the people in the office were dumbfounded and looked shocked at the scene that Shifeng had ruined. The mayor angrily removed the tomato from his face and glared at Shifeng, asking what this adventurer was doing. A system window appeared. Mayor Cross' attitude towards you has been lowered by 100 points. Before the mayor could say anything else, 2 more tomatoes flew at him, their pulp and juice dripping onto his face and clothes. Shifeng continued to throw tomatoes at him until they disappeared from his inventory. All the townspeople who came to the mayor's office looked at Shifeng as if he was crazy and didn't understand what was going on. A black-haired man frightenedly asked if there were such crazy people here. The man next to him said that Shifeng would be killed right here and now. The girl with the staff behind her back said that she couldn't believe that he would attack the mayor himself. The mayor's eyes turned black and his pupil began to glow red. He removed another tomato from his face. A system message appeared. Attention. The attitude of Mayor Cross towards you has been downgraded to hostile. Shifeng smiled and said, "This is just the beginning." The mayor shouted angrily, his scream echoing off the walls of the office. An exclamation point appeared in front of the mayor's face, indicating imminent danger. He frowned at Shifeng, exuding an ominous and unfriendly atmosphere. Shifeng hesitated for a second and watched as the mayor jumped at him. But at the last moment, he managed to pull his sword out of its sheath and deflect the powerful attack. The shockwave sent Shifeng rolling back several meters. He received 84 points of damage. The girls beside him covered their mouths with their palms in shock, while the 2 guys beside him marveled at his strength as Shifeng had deflected that blow with a simple sword. The mayor's face began to change. His hair turned red, his teeth began to turn into fangs, and his ears sharpened. In a second, he turned into a wolf. His clothes tore, his skin was covered in thick red fur, and a black tail grew behind him. His face began to resemble that of a beast, and his fingernails turned into sharp black claws. It got down on all fours, roared, and shouted that it would kill Shifeng. All the players present at the city hall did not expect the mayor to be a werewolf, so someone had already prepared shields and swords for defense. Shifeng was standing near the guards, and at that time, the mayor was running towards him. Suddenly, the guards stepped forward and said that an impure power had been detected. They attacked the mayor with their steel spears, inflicting 634 points of damage. They shouted that they would protect the city from such creatures. Shifeng looked at what was happening with satisfaction. If he had attacked the mayor, the guards would have killed him on the spot. However, the tomatoes didn't cause any damage, but caused the same hostility as the attack. When the mayor blocks the first attack in the battle, he turns into a werewolf. The guard's AI is programmed to destroy any foul thing, so now all he has to do is wait. The guards repeatedly damaged the ferocious werewolf with their sharp spears, while the werewolf howled in pain. The players noticed the guards attacking the mayor and decided to help them. The entire crowd rushed the mayor, attacking him with swords, axes, and knives. The mages began throwing fireballs at the monster, which growled and tried to defend itself. Someone stabbed it through the heart with a sharp spear, and then the breathless body of the werewolf fell to the ground with a clatter. Blood spurted from its body, and blue pixels hovered around it. The players surrounded the mayor's body, wondering why nothing had fallen off. The girl with the staff shouted that they didn't even have any experience. They started looking for the guy who threw tomatoes at the mayor, realizing that he must know something. At that time, Shifeng was already walking down dusky alley. He held onto the hilt of his sword and threw something into the air. A system window appeared. Congratulations. You have destroyed Mayor Cross and obtained the mayor's signet item. The item he threw was the mayor's seal. It looked like a bronze medallion with a skull and red stones. Shifeng took the seal to the homeless man who gave him the quest. He gave the seal to him, and the man thanked him sincerely for fulfilling his request. He smiled broadly, and his eyes gazed at the precious seal. The traveler held out a small stone box to Shifeng as he knelt down. The man said that this would be useful for the boy. A system window appeared. Unique Sherlock quest completed. You have gained 2,000 experience, 20 weapon mastery points, and a chest containing a luxurious ring. Shifeng's level was increased. He looked at the box with interest, thinking about the great rewards he had received and wondering if level 0 would give him a quest bonus. Shifeng tensed up for a second and looked at the box with confusion. He decided that it was time to find out what he was going to get. Shifeng began to open the box, and it slowly began to illuminate everything with white crystal light. As soon as he opened the box completely, the entire area was illuminated with a bright glow, and a pillar of lightning bolts shot into the sky. Shifeng covered his eyes with his palms so that he wouldn't be blinded by the bright white light. A silver ring with words engraved in an unknown language floated in the air. Around it, blue glowing prayers floated and swirled. A system window appeared. Gravity ring, quality, black steel rank, required level 0, available to all classes. Adds 3 to strength, 1 to dexterity and 1 to fortitude. Special ability, free gravity. Significantly reduces the user's gravity, lightens the body, and speeds movement. Duration, 30 seconds, recharge, 5 minutes. Shifeng put the mysterious ring on the index finger of his left hand. He was overjoyed with his trophy, his eyes shining with happiness, and his mouth widened in a broad smile. He reopened the system window with his traits. Shifeng thoughtfully rested his fist on his chin and decided to continue investing in his agility. Right now, his overall speed was comparable to the pumped-up assassins. He pressed the button to increase his agility until he ran out of pumping points. His agility was 12 points. After that, he spent 15 points to improve his one-handed swordsmanship, which ended up at 20 points. A dialogue box appears. Your one-handed swordsmanship has reached 20 points. You have been promoted to novice swordsman. The damage of the one-handed sword has been increased to 10%. Shifeng thought that it was not enough for a swordsman to know the basic moves. He also needed to pass the goblin test and get the skill book. Shifeng went to the arena where the goblin test was held. He opened the heavy wooden door, and in front of him were steps leading to the battlefield. He looked around and saw that the arena was divided into 2 parts. On the first half of the arena, 3 people stood and watched what was going on. In the second half, the trial itself took place. 3 blue goblins stood on a balcony near the arena, firing their cannons at the players as they ran down a small path. At the end and beginning of the path were circles that marked the beginning and end of the path. Next to the circle that was at the end, there were more goblins standing on either side of it. At that time, one of the players ran down the path while a barrage of bullets from the goblins rained down on him. The players outside the arena were upset that all their stats were 10, and that no skills or items worked inside the arena. They didn't know what to do in such a situation. The guy in blue with the staff was already grabbing his hair in frustration, and his friend, a short-haired brunette, was already crying because he had to pay for this challenge, and then he started cursing at the goblins. Their comrade was knocked off his feet by a barrage of bullets that passed right through him, preventing him from continuing the ordeal. A magic circle appeared beneath his feet and an inscription appeared in front of him, signifying resurrection. He had blue patterns on his face that resembled scars. His hair was carelessly styled in different directions. He cursed and said that he was very close, then asked if his friends had any money left. His friends lowered their heads shyly. The guy with the short haircut scratched his head and said they had given him all the money and had nothing left. He addressed him as the boss of Heartstabber. Shifeng couldn't believe his ears and looked at him in disbelief. He thought that in the future, Heartstabber would be one of the top 10 assassins in the kingdom. At the beginning of his journey, Shifeng didn't think that he was like this. Heartstabber noticed Shifeng standing beside him and looked at him enthusiastically. He waved his hand and introduced himself. He said that he was the head of the League of Assassins Guild. Heartstabber was wearing a blue shirt with a black neck and sleeves, and black pants. He was wearing a leather belt with a metal plate on it, and a knife in a sheath was hanging from his belt. Heartstabber asked Shifeng to lend him 5 coins and promised to pay him back 20 coins tomorrow. He swore that the League of Assassins would soon become a famous guild, and if Shifeng helped him now, he might even accept him. Feng said, of course, he would lend him 5 coins. Heartstabber laughed playfully and put his hand on Feng's shoulder. Feng looked at the hand and inwardly thought that Heartstabber would refuse to repay the debt. He looked into his eyes and saw a cocky and arrogant face with a sly smile. Feng said that he would lend him the money on the condition that he would pay him back tomorrow with 50 coins instead of 20. Heartstabber was taken aback and looked at the guy questioningly. His friends had already started to get aggressive, shouting how he dared to bargain with their head. And the other said that greed would ruin this guy. They grinned and were ready to attack him. The guy with the short haircut said that Heartstabber himself was asking him for money and called Feng an outsider. Feng picked up the hilt of his sword and calmly asked if Heartstabber would agree to such loan terms. Heartstabber looked at him and firmly agreed. He was about a head shorter than Feng, but that didn't stop him from being confident. Feng said that he would trust his honesty and asked him to add him as a friend to send him money. A system window to transfer money appeared in front of him. Feng also reminded him that the debt must be repaid tomorrow. Heartstabber firmly and loudly said that he would not forget to return the money. Feng took out his coin bag and started throwing it in the air with a satisfied face. He said that it was quite good to make 50 coins out of 5 coins. At this time, Heartstabber and his friends snickered, lowered their heads, and pouted their lips. The guy with the wand in his hand worriedly asked Heartstabber if he was really going to return that much. The guy with the short haircut thoughtfully asked if Feng was asking for too much, and said that they could save up and come back tomorrow. Heartstabber clenched his fist and shook with anger. He said that he was the head of the Assassin's League and the face of the guild, adding that he always paid back his debts. His friends looked at him in confusion. Heartstabber raised his head and cried, clenching his fists. He shouted desperately that he was so close to the finish line, and there was no way he would give up. They owed it to him to do it today. His friends also cried at the heartfelt words of their leader and clenched their fists in support and agreement. Heartstabber looked at the goblin. He was bald, with long ears, and wore only a loincloth with armor on his wrists. Heartstabber's friends looked around. The guy with the short hair indicated that Feng was also there. At this time, he stood in front of the goblin and read something on the system window. Heartstabber proudly crossed his arms on his chest and said that the guy was underestimating the challenge. He added that he had less than 30 meters to run, but halfway through, the goblins would change their attack timing and start firing ahead, so Feng would never be able to make it. His friend with the staff said that even the head could only run 18 meters. At that time, Feng calmly waited for the countdown from 3 to 1. He smiled faintly. A system window appeared, signaling the start of the trial. The starter pistol fired, emitting a sound, after which Feng began to run as fast as he could. His face looked concentrated, his mouth was slightly open, and his eyebrows were furrowed. As soon as the start of the trial was announced, the goblins on the balcony started firing their weapons. There were 2 goblins below, one was just firing the starting gun, and the other was holding 2 red flags that would signal the start and end of the trial. Feng ran and did not stop. The barrage of bullets didn't scare him and he continued to run forward. There were bright flashes of gunfire all around, but they did not bother Feng at all. The blue goblins continued to load and fire their weapons, and one of them was even surprised that Feng could maneuver between the bullets so easily. He knew and felt the flight path of the bullets, so it was no problem for him. The guy with the short hair opened his mouth and said in shock that this guy could dodge attacks so easily and was faster than their guild leader. His friend with the staff punched him in the stomach, interrupting him and telling him to shut up. Heartstabber hesitated at this time and put his fist to his mouth. He said that Feng might be a trained athlete or sportsman, so it was not surprising that he was stronger than ordinary people. Heartstabber tensed up and began to gnaw at the nail on his thumb. He watched Feng and thought that he was not as simple as he looked, as he moved as if he knew the arena by heart. He noticed that his moves were quite simple yet effective. Feng was very agile. Debris from the ground flew around Feng, smoke and sparks from attacks were everywhere, but he confidently avoided taking any damage. Heartstabber looked at the guy smugly. He knitted his eyebrows and smiled. He thought that after 15 meters, the goblins would change their attack and Feng would be finished after that. As Feng passed the 15-meter mark, a blue glow appeared under his feet, marking this mark. The goblins changed their weapons to 6-barreled revolvers, each of them having 2 of them. They smiled smugly with their mouths wide open. All 3 of the goblins on the balcony began to fire in rapid bursts, giving Feng no rest. The smoke from the muzzles continued to rise into the air, and the sparks from the bullets illuminated the entire arena with a warm orange light. The golden-colored bullets flew by so quickly that they seemed to cut through the haze that filled the arena. As the bullets flew past Feng, he began to draw his steel sword from its scabbard. Now, it was his turn to be surprised. His face looked confident and excited. He held his sword in front of him as he continued to run forward. He wasn't intimidated by the bullets or the smoke that partially blocked his view. The guy with the short haircut started laughing at him and pointed his index finger at him. He taunted him and asked if he really thought he could block bullets with a sword, saying that Shifeng didn't even know the rules. His friend agreed and also began to giggle, saying that hitting even one bullet would be considered a failure in the test. There were clangs and sparks from the metal coming into contact with the bullets. The lead bullets bounced off Shifeng's sword one after the other, never reaching him or damaging him. He acted coolly, calculating his every move. After Shifeng dealt with this batch of bullets, he looked ahead and began to think about what he should do next. His eyebrows furrowed and his mouth opened slightly. The Assassin Guild member was stunned and opened his mouth in surprise. He didn't understand how Shifeng could do this and couldn't believe that he was human. The heart stabber beside him crossed his arms on his chest and tensed up. His eyes were wide open and a drop of sweat ran down his face. Shifeng dodged the attacks and deflected the bullets that flew straight at him. The bullets struck by the sword fell to the ground with a soft clatter and clink. Shifeng continued to maintain his concentration, his face looking a bit thoughtful and tense. The guy with the staff shouted at Heartstabber that Shifeng had already run 22 meters and the finish line was coming soon. He panicked and shouted loudly, causing Heartstabber to hit him on the head. He said that they were already boring him with their yelling and told him to shut up. The guy got a big bump on his head from the head kick. Heartstabber frowned and looked at Shifeng again. He thought about the fact that the game had just been released, yet there were already players who could predict the trajectory of bullets and dodge them. He thought that Shifeng's control deserved respect. Shifeng stopped dodging the bullets for a while and just maneuvered under the barrage of fire. Suddenly, Heartstabber took a step forward and shouted loudly for Shifeng to be more careful. He clenched his fists in agitation. His guild's subordinates were even a bit startled by the surprise and backed away. At this time, the goblins threw down their revolvers and pulled out multi-barrel high-speed machine guns that resembled miniguns. Their faces looked desperate and distraught, hoping that at least Shifeng would die from this. They loaded the machine guns and started shooting at the guy. Heartstabber looked discouraged and shocked at what was happening. He shouted that the goblins had stripped themselves naked because no one would be able to survive under such an onslaught. The bullets flew even faster, destroying the arena floor but never hitting Shifeng. The bullet casings of the machine guns flew out quickly, and the goblins tensed up, gritting their teeth in anger. As the barrage of gunfire approached Shifeng, he drew his sword again. His face looked tense, yet focused at the same time. Not only did he block the attacks with his sword, he also sliced them in half in the air as they flew toward him. The bullets and their fragments hit the stone floor with a clatter and flew in all directions. Suddenly, a loud noise was heard and a great explosion was seen, scattering shards of the stone floor all over the arena. A large column of smoke rose, and Heartstabber and his subordinates became tense and nervous. Cold sweat dripped from their faces, and their pupils narrowed in fear. Then, they saw Shifeng leaping out of the explosion, covering his face with his hands. Miraculously, he was not hit by the stone debris, and the explosion began to stop. Shifeng gritted his teeth and stared at the target, drops of sweat rolling down his face from such intense physical exertion. He landed on his feet, skidding slightly on the ground. Dust kicked up from his boots. The starting pistol goblin and the red flag goblin looked at him in surprise. They did not expect Shifeng to be able to pass them. The goblin with the flags started waving them happily and jumped up. He announced that Shifeng had passed the bronze medal test in 14 seconds and congratulated him. The victory announcement flashed on the screen above the balcony. The goblins on the balcony threw their machine guns to the ground. One of them kicked the machine gun in anger. The second scratched the back of his head incomprehensibly, and the third folded his arms on his chest unhappily. The goblins on the path jumped up happily, congratulating them on their victory and offering to celebrate. Shifeng was breathing heavily, greedily swallowing air with his mouth. He put his sword back into its sheath. A system window appeared. Congratulations on passing the bronze medal challenge for the first time. You will receive 1 silver coin and the swordsman's skill, Thunderbolt. Heartstabber raised his fist in the air with a happy smile and shouted. The rest of the Assassin League also shouted happily, saying that Shifeng had done well. A system window appeared, Thunderbolt. Type, movement, required, sword 3 quick swings of the sword strike all targets within a distance of 10 to 20 meters. The first strike deals 130% damage, each subsequent strike deals 20% more damage. Recharge, 30 seconds. With a happy and satisfied face, Shifeng read all the characteristics of the swordsman's skill. Standing on the brick floor, he wiped the sweat from his forehead with his palm and said, "This is incredible." The swordsman is a class that concentrates all of its damage on single targets. There aren't many area attacks that are strong enough for this class, but Thunderbolt is one of them, so it was a great find for Shifeng. He scratched his chin thoughtfully and continued to stare at the system window. Behind him, the guys from the Assassin's League were standing behind him, looking at him. Shifeng embarrassedly turned to look at them and saw their enthusiastic and joyful faces. It was as if their eyes were glowing with joy. As Shifeng was about to leave, he turned around and told them to keep playing and that he would leave, adding that he would wait for the 50 coins from Heartstabber. The guy with the short haircut said with a gambling expression that since Shifeng had gotten the prize, maybe they would take the reward from him. His friend with the staff supported him, smiling mischievously as well. Heartstabber hit each of them on the head, knocking them off their feet and leaving big, painful bumps on their heads. He became angry and began to curse at them. He shouted at them that they should respect the strong players instead of trying to rob them. At that time, Shifeng calmly walked towards the exit of the arena. The sky was bright blue, and the clouds were floating calmly above it. The trees had unusually beautiful red and purple leaves. Standing on the forest path, Shifeng looked at the sky and thought, since he had acquired a powerful skill, it was time to start practicing. There were a lot of people in this forest. A shirtless guy with a large sword behind his back shouted that they were planning to raid Red Leaf Forest and urgently needed a warrior who could do a lot of damage. Another guy in a blue robe with shoulder pads shouted that he was gathering an immortal party. They had 3 healers and needed another one. A black-haired girl in a red tunic with golden shoulder pads walked beside them. She was a bit bored as she looked at the people in the crowd. Next to her was Shifeng, who was looking at his inventory. He had explosive berries in there that looked like big pink raspberries. Shifeng exhaled tiredly and said that he had bought 20 pieces of explosive berries and only had 30 copper coins left, so he needed to make a good profit today. He looked at the place called Red Leaf Forest, required level 1. In the distance, someone was fighting in the forest. He looked closer and saw 4 people in a field fighting a white wolf. 2 warriors, a tank in front, a gunner with support behind. Of course, the experience is divided among 4 people, but the efficiency and safety of such a team is high. He looked at the players with an interested expression for a while. The death penalty is critical. Not only will the players lose a level, but all of their equipment will be taken away. Shifeng pictured in his mind an abstract, frustrated level 10 player who lost his armor when he died and was resurrected without it, with a level of 9 instead of 10. Shifeng was approached by a bald, muscular man who told him that this was their place to farm and that he should try to stop them. Shifeng looked at him in confusion and didn't say anything back, but in his mind, he thought that he had nothing to do but kill their low-level monsters. He went deeper into the forest and saw a place with the required level 5. There was a pack of bears running around in circles that looked threatening. Shifeng's strength was now sufficient even for such monsters. He looked at a young level 4 bear whose health was 800 out of 800. He understood that bears were hard to kill, and if you attacked them, they would call for a mother bear who would just tear you to pieces, so he shouldn't touch them. He saw that there was a waterfall here, and a level 5 white forest wolf with a health of 200 out of 200 was spraying water from it. Shifeng quietly sneaked up to the wolf from behind and slowly drew his sword from its sheath. He was a few meters away from it. The wolf is an agile and powerful monster. Shifeng tensed up and watched the beast carefully. He began to slowly and silently approach the unsuspecting wolf. Shifeng could handle one without much difficulty, but they were at the waterhole and if a pack was here, he would be in trouble. Shifeng accidentally tripped and stepped on a rickety rock near the edge of the canyon. The rock beneath his feet fell off the cliff, causing Shifeng to fall into the canyon. He screamed in panic as he looked at where he was going to fall. The guy managed to group himself in the air, so he was able to land on his feet without getting hurt. He landed near a cave with dozens of red, angry eyes staring at him from the darkness. Shifeng turned around in fear and pressed his lips together, his pupils narrowing in fear. White ferocious wolves emerged from the cave, and they had already begun to growl and growl. They slowly approached him. Shifeng ran into a whole pack of wild wolves. He thought that he had cursed himself at the waterhole when he was about to attack a wolf that was drinking from it. He ran as fast as he could, occasionally looking back at the pack that had almost caught up with him. The wolves growled angrily as they continued to chase the man. Dust kicked up in the air as they ran. One of the males almost caught up with him and almost bit his arm, but Shifeng managed to jump up in time, fooling them. He landed on the ground, which collapsed under his feet, but luckily the wolves were still behind him. Shifeng activated free gravity, causing his eyes to glow blue and a white smoke ring to appear around him. With this ability, he was able to cover greater distances with less effort. He ran far enough away from them, leaving only dust and stone fragments behind. After a few minutes, he stopped. Shifeng tried to catch his breath, greedily swallowing air with his mouth. He was sweating, so he turned around to see if the wolves were still chasing him. Shifeng wiped the sweat from his face and was glad that he could finally escape from them. He was at a place called Central Mountain, recommended level 6. Shifeng stood at the foot of a white stone mountain, surrounded by picturesque trees with red leaves. Shifeng had heard that there was a silver chest hidden at the top of Central Mountain. Shifeng's face looked calm and confident. He decided to go get the chest. Shifeng went to the beautiful scenic waterfall. The sound of the water was relaxing and peaceful. Shifeng covered his eyes so that he wouldn't be blinded by the sun and looked around. He hesitantly said, "This is where the climbing spot is." He walked over to the cliff near the waterfall and looked up. He said that there was no road to the top of the mountain, and it could only be climbed with the hidden skill of levitation, which would become available at 40 units of skill. Shifeng snapped his fingers and stuck out his index finger. Luckily, he had a gravity ring. He ducked his knees and pushed himself off the ground before skillfully skipping along the rocks protruding from the cliff. He grabbed the edge of the cliff with his left hand and began to climb until he reached the top. He sat down on a large boulder and looked around. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise and froze. A huge gray stone hand appeared behind his back. Shifeng turned around and realized that a new challenge was about to begin. He stood on the cobblestone facing the stone monster that was simply colossal in size. The stone golem climbed onto the rock and leaned on his arm. The stone golem was level 5, with 550 out of 550 health points. The monster opened its mouth wide and let out a deafening scream. Its eyes glowed red, and huge fangs could be seen on its lower jaw. Without taking his eyes off the golem, Shifeng opened the inventory window and started to take something out. Shifeng gave the monster a serious look and said that he had a gift for the golem. He took out a single explosive berry. A system window appeared. Explosive berry. Type: unique item. Requirements: none. Slow movement speed by 30% in a 3 meters by 3 meters area. Slow movement speed by 70%. Duration: 1 minute. Mastery of chopping blow, +3. The golem struck the cobblestone Shifeng was sitting on with its heavy fist, but it managed to dodge at the last second. In flight, Shifeng aimed precisely and threw an explosive berry. The berry fell right at the feet of the golem and began to glow. The explosive berry began to emit vibrations and then exploded, gradually increasing its range. At this time, Shifeng managed to land and slip slightly to the other side. Waves began to emanate from the berry, affecting the golem. As the golem slowed down more and more, Shifeng managed to run around it and was behind its back. He drew his steel sword and stretched out to attack. He attacked the golem's chest and left leg and moved to the opposite side. Shifeng smiled and turned around to look at the golem. Shifeng confidently said, under the influence of the explosive berry, there was no way the golem would hit him, and now he would be able to pump up his punching power. There couldn't be a better pump for Shifeng. The golem slowly started to move. It raised its left foot and stepped on the spot where Shifeng was, but Shifeng was lightning fast enough to jump back to the other side, aided by the shock wave from the golem's strike. The stone monster roared, its eyes no longer glowing red. It swung its fist, aiming its strike at Shifeng. It jumped up, pushed off, and flew several meters into the air. The golem smashed a rock on the cliff with its powerful fist. Shifeng changed the trajectory of his flight and used all his power to hit the golem. He jumped from side to side, inflicting multiple damages on the behemoth that couldn't move as fast as Shifeng. At one point, after another attack from Shifeng, the golem let out a shrill scream and began to collapse. A loud rumbling sound was heard from the monster's fall, and the debris of the mountain was scattered from the cliff. The golem's face froze into a grimace of death, and its head, which had been torn off from its torso, fell to the ground along with its entire body. At this time, Shifeng walked away to avoid being hit by the shock wave from the golem's fall without turning around. After everything had calmed down, the guy climbed onto the golem's head and sat on it. He was surprised that something had fallen off at all. A system window appeared. Normal giant shirt. Rank: normal. Type: armor. Required level: 4. Strength: 20 out of 20. Defense: 3. Mana: 10. Suddenly, a faint squeaking sound and the flapping of tiny wings could be heard. Shifeng lifted his head and turned around. He saw a flock of black and gray bats flapping their tiny wings. He saw that the bats were flying out of a cave that was nearby behind bushes and treetops. The cave inside was filled with blue light that reflected off the stone walls. Xifeng confidently entered it, stomping softly. Before entering the depths of the cave, he turned around one last time and looked around the rock where he had fought the golem. Xifeng walked through the stone corridor and entered the main hall of the cave. He saw what was illuminating the cave so brightly. It was another stone monster that had bright blue crystals on its neck and arms that emitted light. It had a large torso and a small head, as if it was made of white stone fragments. Behind its back were sharp red stones that resembled spades. Human skulls were lined up on them. Perhaps they were the remains of adventurers who had wandered here and couldn't get out. Xifeng stood a few meters away from the monster and stared at it in astonishment. It was an elite level 6 earthbender with a health of 900 out of 900. His face resembled that of a human. It had massive stone eyebrows and something that looked like a beard. Xifeng looked at him excitedly and started to draw his sword, saying that he had found another big guy. The glowing particles of earthbender crystals floated in the air. Xifeng kicked back so hard that the stone floor beneath his feet began to crumble. Xifeng sprinted around and slashed a few times with his sword, thinking that he could try to defeat a level 6 elite monster. The monster was sitting peacefully near the spikes before, but after the attacks, it woke up and screamed. Xifeng dealt it a small amount of damage, only 2 or 3 points of damage each. This was enough for the monster to wake up, and its eyes began to glow red. The health of this monster dropped to 895. It grinned and viciously lowered its gaze to Xifeng, who frowned and clenched his teeth, calling him a pathetic human being. The earthbender launched an attack, jumping and swinging his fists. The blow hit the stone floor, shattering it in seconds. In terms of strength, the mole man was far superior to the stone golem. Xifeng managed to dodge the attack and jumped onto the wall next to the monster. He had already pulled out an exploding berry from his inventory. The monster opened its mouth after looking at him. It clenched its fists again and prepared to attack him again. Xifeng started bouncing off the wall. His face looked serious, full of concentration. He thought about the fact that even though the monster had a lot of health, with his agility, it wouldn't be a problem for Xifeng. It wasn't until the last moment that the golem realized that he wasn't going to hit the guy again. And by that time, his fist had already hit the spot where Xifeng was sitting earlier. It threw the berry at his face and jumped onto his chest. After that, Xifeng looked at where he should jump to so that the excavator wouldn't crush him. He landed not far from the monster's feet, which looked terrifyingly gigantic. Xifeng jumped up, somersaulted, and jumped again, attacking the elite monster with his sword. Xifeng paused for a second, frowning and gritting his teeth. The guy continued to deal damage, slashing at the monster again and again with his sword. Small pebbles gradually flew away from the monster and crumbled to the ground. Xifeng managed to deal 4 damage to it twice, 3 damage to it twice, and 2 damage to it once. At this time, the monster roared deafeningly in pain with its mouth wide open. While Xifeng was in the air, the elite monster tried to hit him with its fist, but it missed. It landed a few meters away from him, which the earthbender didn't notice right away. Xifeng saw that the monster was covered in a green aura and regained 18 life points. Xifeng hissed and raised his head grimly, realizing that he had acted foolishly. The lead enemies regenerated 2% of their full health every 5 seconds. The monster was regenerating faster than Xifeng's attacks. He had no choice but to use a skill called Thunderbolt. The elite digger and Xifeng ran towards each other, both preparing to strike. The monster had almost reached the guy and was about to attack him, but at the last moment, Xifeng jumped onto its arm and crouched down. The earthbender began to scream in anger. Xifeng struck it 3 times with a thunderbolt, dealing a total of 28 damage to it. The crystals on the monster's arm began to crack and shatter. Xifeng smiled with satisfaction, realizing that it had worked. A second later, the monster raised its head, clenched its fists, and a blue ball appeared around it, scattering rocks all over the cave. The elite digger jumped up to the ceiling and shouted that he would smash the man to pieces. He clenched his fists and landed on the ground, smashing the ground within a radius of 10 meters. Xifeng was surprised that he used a special attack. The impact caused a small explosion, sending dust into the air and shrinking the monster's field of vision. Xifeng dodged safely and slashed the rocks in its path with his sword in one leap. The ferocious monster's attack shook the walls, and the walls and ceiling began to crumble. Xifeng crouched down a few meters away from the monster. Amidst the smoke and dust, the silhouette of an elite digger could be seen in the distance, standing ominously amidst the debris of the cave. Feng realized that the monster was in a state of exhaustion. A system window appeared, fatigue phase. Some enemies would enter this state after using a special skill. The monster's attack, defense, and regeneration are significantly reduced. Feng realized that this was his chance. He smiled demurely and took one last look at the monster with his brown eyes before dispersing and launching an attack. He quickly approached the tired monster and bridged the distance between them. Feng bounced off the 2 stone fragments and jumped towards the excavator. At this time, he unsuccessfully tried to crush it with his fists. Feng bent his knees and raised his sword above his head while holding the hilt of the sword with both hands. He slashed the sword clearly into the monster's eye, piercing it. After the attack, Feng immediately jumped back as the monster screamed in pain. He struck it several times with his sword as he flew down. The elite monster leaned back slightly as Feng fell headfirst at the same time, but he managed to change his position at the last moment and landed cleanly on his feet. It landed near the stone steps of the excavator and then started running in the opposite direction. The monster fell onto its hands and slowly began to rise. The monster's eyes went blank. It opened its mouth and a thick vapor came out. It screamed again and clenched its fists. The blue ball around it reappeared before disappearing somewhere. Feng began to look around anxiously, trying to figure out where it had gone. After a second, the monster appeared behind the guy's back and approached him. Feng noticed it and turned to face it, but he didn't have time to dodge the attack. The elite digger struck him with his fist, and Feng only had time to cover his head with his hands, but he suffered tremendous damage. The ground beneath his feet began to crumble, breaking into 2 pieces. The monster threw him back to the opposite wall with its blow, leaving a dusty trail of dust on Feng. Feng tried to get down on one knee, his body glowing red. He started coughing up blood. The monster had dealt him 98 damage, leaving Feng with only 2 life points. He held his sword tightly in his hand and wiped the blood from his face that was left after the coughing fit. He decided that he had to try to the last. He would get it all or nothing. Feng first used free gravity, after which he immediately jumped closer to the monster. After that, he used a thunderbolt that had managed to recover by this time. He struck the digger's body 3 times, leaving deep wounds on the monster after the sword. Feng jumped away from it once again, only to land a decisive blow on it. He channeled all of his power into one sword strike. Feng attacked it in such a way that he sliced his sword through the monster and threw it straight into its chest. The monster's body began to shatter and collapse into small pieces, and a bright white light began to emanate from it. The tattered sword was stuck between the rocks at the other end of the cave. After defeating the monster, rewards fell out of it. Feng picked up the sword and returned it to its sheath. The rewards glowed with purple and blue colors. Feng picked up the golden shield first and knelt down on one knee. He rejoiced at the rewards and said that not only the equipment, but also the techniques had fallen from the boss. Nearby, a book with a green hieroglyph hovered above the ground. A system window appeared. Parry. Type, technique book. Quality, normal. Requires a melee weapon that can parry a direct hit once. Rollback time, 30 seconds. Feng picked up this book and examined it carefully. He said that he could use such a defense technique himself. A system window appeared, signaling that the parry technique had been learned. Feng stepped out of the cave and looked at the blue sky. He had changed his clothes. He was now wearing a black t-shirt and pants, silver armor with a golden collar on his chest, and armor on his thighs. His hands were protected by golden handcuffs. Feng kneaded his shoulders and thought about the fact that his ultimate goal was the mountain peak with the silver chest. Feng began to skillfully climb up the next cliff, jumping onto various ledges and climbing higher and higher. Before he completely climbed the mountain, he cast a serious, intense glance at the view in front of him. Feng safely climbed the mountain and continued on his way. He walked into a village that was empty and quiet. He began to look around, thinking that this mist had never been here before. The village was full of solid wooden buildings, with a small stone building standing in the distance. Feng started to draw his sword, but he was interrupted by a system window that appeared in front of him. The player is the first to discover the Forgotten Lands. The hidden quest Former Glory has been activated. The player will be temporarily disconnected from the outside world. It will be possible to leave this place immediately after completing the quest. Feng read the quest carefully and thought about the fact that in his previous life, he had only heard about the mithril chest, but there was no hidden quest. A window appeared in front of Feng, asking if he would accept this hidden task with 2 options, accept or refuse. Behind the system window, a golden curl floated in the air. A new system window appeared. Forgotten Lands Former Glory Hidden Tasks. Content, find out for yourself. Feng realized that there were no conditions here. He remembered that he had seen something similar on the forum. Xifeng looked at the system window a little tensely and remembered that there were special quests in the God Sphere. They could only be unlocked in certain locations, and once the quest was completed, the location was closed forever. Even though he had seen players trumpeting about it on the forums, who would have thought that he would stumble upon such a quest by accident? Xifeng accepted the quest. He began to look around and saw the dilapidated and crumbling buildings surrounded by wooden barrels. Everything around them was covered in a thick and dense fog. He thought that since they insisted, he wouldn't refuse. In that case, he'd have to search the place thoroughly. At the very least, he would simply die and be reborn in the city. He approached a dilapidated house that was already beginning to crumble. Its cladding was beginning to fall away, revealing nondescript gray bricks. It was quite dark due to the fog in the city, as there were no lights left. He opened the wooden door and entered the hallway of the building. Inside, he saw a crumbling oak floor, brick walls showing behind crumbling putty, a green shield with spears hanging on the wall, and a cracked vase. He walked on and came to a table with an hourglass, a red liquid in a decanter and many scrolls. He picked up one of them and started to read, but there was nothing important for him to read. Xifeng went to another room, where there were books and more scrolls on the floor. On a shelf, there were various bottles and textbooks. He looked into the wooden chest on the floor, but he found nothing there. Out of anger and frustration, Xifeng kicked the wall, which immediately started to crumble due to its age. There were no non-player characters, no hint, nothing at all. He couldn't waste time wandering around in these ruins. He needed to find an elevated area and look around from there. Xifeng climbed onto the roof of a nearby building and began to take a bird's eye view of the city. At first, he could only see the dilapidated wooden and tile roofs, but then he noticed something in the thick fog. After a while, the fog began to clear, and he narrowed his eyes to get a better look at what Xifeng had noticed. He saw a mage tower that looked like an ordinary green tower from above, but on its roof, there was a huge ruby mounted on a stone pedestal. Xifeng stepped down from the roof and walked towards this tower. This building was completely different from the other buildings in the village. It looked neat and tidy, and it had beautiful stucco and white stone pillars near the massive gate. As soon as Xifeng climbed to the top, the mage tower immediately appeared. Obviously, this was the trigger for the quest. As he entered this building, someone immediately approached him, calling him a young adventurer. An elder appeared in front of him, wearing an elaborate red and blue robe. It was decorated with golden bands of spells. He had a long beard, and in his right hand he held a golden sand with a crescent moon at the end. It welcomed him to the Heavenly City. Xifeng remembered the Heavenly City. It was the same city whose appearance had once shocked the entire game world. He opened his eyes in shock, his pupils narrowed, and a small drop of sweat ran down his cheek. Xifeng thought that Heavenly City had fallen back during the Third God War, and he didn't understand where this city came from. An elder in a cassock and hood stood on the stairs and said that he believed that the hero who came from far away was eager to become stronger. He said that he was willing to help him and asked if Xifeng was willing to undergo his trials. Xifeng went to the stairs and said he was willing without hesitation. The elder said that he was willing to give him a choice of 3 ways to pass the test and was about to tell him about them. But Xifeng interrupted him and said that it was not even worth asking him. The guy smugly and firmly said that his choice would be the hardest trial with a hellish difficulty level. Xifeng calmly and relaxedly looked at the old man, pursed his lips, and thought to himself that he already knew more about this game than anyone else. So why not take a chance? The old man laughed out loud. As he smiled at him, there were many wrinkles on his face that became even more noticeable afterwards. He said that Xifeng was so young and full of energy, adding that he really liked him. A system window appeared. Task: Former Glory. Fight 1,000 monsters of the same level. Pass requirements: kill 500 monsters. Time limit: 4 hours. If you fail, all attributes will be reduced by 10 units. Accept or refuse the mission. Xifeng accepted the mission, after which the elder said that he hoped the hero would not regret his decision, and then disappeared, turning into pixels and leaving the guy alone. He stepped outside and saw that the sky had turned black and red, giving off an ominous atmosphere. Monsters began to appear on the street. They were level 2 ghost warriors with a health reserve of 230 out of 230. Their faces looked like sinister skulls with red glowing eyes. Their bodies resembled withered corpses, and their long gray hair fluttered in the wind. They were clad in red armor resembling that of Japanese warriors, wore helmets with horns on their heads, and held swords with massive ends in their hands. Each of them had 2 of them. The monsters immediately rushed to attack, charging at the mage tower with all their might. A system window appeared. The trial had begun. A huge crowd of enemies rushed straight towards the building, their trampling echoing throughout the city. Xifeng decided to go back to the tower and climbed up to the roof to assess his strength while looking at the monsters. He realized that if he ran straight towards the monsters without thinking, he would be destroyed. Xifeng looked down at them from above with a hostile and contemptuous gaze as he pursed his lips. He had an idea, so he went back into the tower and jumped down over the stone partition. He flew down several floors, his hair fluttering in the wind. He landed on a large wooden staircase and immediately drew his sword. Only 2 monsters could go down these stairs at the same time, so if he could keep them here, he would be able to pass the test. By this time, the monsters had already opened the gate of the tower and began to rush up the stairs directly towards Xifeng. He calmly waited for them, his steel sword at the ready. The monsters began to scream, opening their mouths aggressively. Xifeng was able to damage 3 monsters with one strike, taking half of their health and reducing their health from 230 to 100. They began to fly to the side with a scream and died. Xifeng swung his sword and sliced the monsters in half. The monsters were a bit dazed, but they continued their attack. Xifeng skillfully wielded his sword, not giving his vicious enemies a chance. They were unable to inflict any damage on him this time. The breathless bodies of the monsters fell onto the stairs, with some of them falling off the stairs and directly into the main hall. Xifeng looked quite tense, but on the other hand, he remained calm and focused. He thought that after all, killing 500 monsters wouldn't be that difficult if he continued to keep them on the stairs. Gradually, 400 out of 500 monsters were killed. At the bottom, the level 2 ghost killers with 150 out of 150 health were waiting for him. They looked like skeletons. Their lower bodies were clad in armor, and they wore a tattered red hooded cloak on top. They held sharp sabers in their hands. They began to skillfully climb up the walls of the tower, avoiding the stairs that were already full of enemies. While Xifeng was defending himself from the ghost warriors' swords, the ghost assassins jumped on top of him. The veins on Xifeng's face were showing from the exertion, and he turned around to notice the new enemies that were about to harm him. He managed to swing his foot in time to knock down the ghost assassin and hit the ghost warrior with his other foot. Xifeng was able to knock down 3 enemies at once, 2 of them falling down and the third rolling down the stairs. Xifeng jumped away from the railing and jumped right in front of the ghost warrior's face. He crushed its head to the ground with his foot, but at the same time, a ghost assassin sneaked up from behind and attacked him with his sword, causing him some damage. Xifeng kicked him with his foot and threw him to the ground, shouting that they were annoying him by sneaking up behind him. The immobilized assassin's body fell to the rest of the ghost assassins, who stared at Xifeng intently. The guy exhaled tiredly, sweat pouring down his face. Irritated, he wondered why the last 100 monsters he had to kill were so agile. Xifeng was glad that they were very fragile. A system window appeared, 420 out of 500 monsters in progress. He went to the balcony and stood with his back to the ghostly assassins, who started to attack him at that time. Xifeng abruptly turned around and started jumping from corner to corner at lightning speed, smashing the bony monsters into pieces. There was a small bleeding wound on Xifeng's face. With concentration, he looked up and jumped onto the ceiling of the tower so that he could push off and kill a few dozen more ghost monsters in the air. The sky was blue, with clouds floating serenely above it, and the sun was gently illuminating the Mage Tower building. The bones of the slain enemies and their sabers lay on the balcony. Xifeng crouched down on one knee, leaning on his sword. The corpses of the ghost assassins lay on the stairs. A new system window appeared. Task completed. 500 monsters out of 500. Xifeng had several bleeding wounds on his face, and he was breathing heavily, trying to catch his breath. His whole face was covered in sweat. An elder appeared behind him and gave him a task. He smiled and laughed good-naturedly, praising Xifeng. A golden chest appeared in the air, surrounded by blue and purple light. A system window appeared. Former glory mission completed. You have received a valuable golden chest and the title of 1000 to 1. A new system window will appear with a list of titles. Title name, 1000 to 1. Effect, increases the stats of all allies within 30 yards of you by 10%. While the title is in effect, players receive an additional +5 to strength and endurance. Type, for completing a mission. The elder vaporized again and said that Xifeng was free to go. The guy looked at him incomprehensively as he disappeared and tried to call him again with a scared face, asking him to wait for literally 1 minute. Xifeng wanted to talk to him some more. Xifeng went back to Red Leaf City and came to an alley. He was thrown out of the black portal right onto the street, hitting his face on the ground. The people around him stopped in fear, and a passerby shouted in surprise that someone had just fallen from the sky. Xifeng fell onto his back, his face looking exhausted and very tired. He couldn't believe that he had been sent back to Red Leaf City. He He quickly got up and ran to an alleyway at lightning speed. After all, he could not allow his precious chest that he had put so much effort into to be stolen. He looked around to make sure that no one was around. In the narrow alley, the golden chest he had earned was floating in the air. Even a silver secret chest could contain useful items, such as a potion recipe or a forging blueprint. Shifeng wondered what would be inside the gold chest. A system window appeared in front of him, asking if Shifeng wanted to open this chest. Shifeng opened the chest, and the entire area lit up with golden light. Shifeng shockingly jumped back from the item inside the chest. He opened his mouth in surprise and rolled his eyes.